Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So on Friday, my New York Islanders hired Matthew Darche to be their new general manager after a month-long process looking for Lou Lamoriello's successor. And I thought it'd be a cool idea to look at the last 12 months of the New York Islanders because so much has happened and so much mostly for the better. And as a result, the New York Islanders may have avoided what looked like their impending doom for the next 8 to 10 years. So let's get into it. Because yeah, after the 2024 playoffs where they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes in just 5 games, on top of losing to the Carolina Hurricanes the year prior in 6 games, they were probably neck and neck with the Pittsburgh Penguins for the worst spot in the entire NHL for the next decade. But Pittsburgh probably was ahead of them because at least they sold Gensel at the deadline and were looking more towards the future. The Islanders had missed the playoffs in 2022, back-to-back sub-95-point seasons in first-round exits, and the core for the most part was between the ages of like 27 to 34, some really bad contracts spanning all the way out to like 2030. Outside of Noah Dobson, they really had no U25 players. So not only were they an aggressively mediocre team right now that was only going to age and become worse, they had either the worst or second worst prospect pool in the entire NHL. The Athletic ranked them in dead last, saying that they did not have a single top 100 prospect in their prospect pool, as well as ESPN having them 31st. Their top 5 prospects at the time were all around B- kind of prospects. Danny Nelson, a 2023 second-round pick, had a solid freshman year at Notre Dame, but nothing really special. Matthew Maggio was an overager in the 2022 draft, and although he killed it in the OHL, did not have that good of a year in the AHL. Same thing goes for William Dufour, who killed it in the QMJHL, pretty mediocre in the AHL. And then the final 2 were both defensemen. Cal Odelius, who was a 2022 second-round pick from, funny enough, the Devontae's trade. He could not stay healthy and was not trending that good, as well as Isaiah George, who was solid on the London Knights, but didn't really look like he was going to be much at the NHL level at that point. Rightfully so, this team and this core at that time were being compared to the Devils of the mid-2010s that Lou Lamoriello also ran after having success prior. There were no more future assets within the team, and then they went through a really rough stretch. So heading into the 2024 season, me as a New York Islanders fan, I expected Lou Lamoriello to just even double down more on this core and have another Horvat kind of trade, but actually kind of the opposite happened. He does bring in a guy in his mid-20s, but it's 25-year-old Max Siplikov over from Russia, who is kind of the consensus #1 European unrestricted free agent after having 31 goals in the KHL, which ranked 4th in the entire KHL, as well as 145 hits. He was looked at as a potential day-one impact guy and ended up choosing the New York Islanders over a lot of other teams that were better teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was a big win by Lou. Then a month away from the 2024 NHL draft, a trade happens between the Blackhawks and the Islanders. The Blackhawks get the Islanders' 18th overall selection and the 50th overall selection, and the Islanders received the 20th, 54th, and 61st, a month away from the draft. On draft night, if you love a guy at 18, that price made sense, but at the time, to only move back 2 spots in the first round, 4 spots in the second round, and pick up a late second-round pick, this was objectively a very good deal by Lou Lamoriello. And in fairness to Chicago, they had so many picks in this draft and upcoming draft, so their draft picks are kind of expendable. But for Lamoriello, this was a good deal and potentially giving him assets to what I thought was end up trading these picks for more impact guys that are in their late 20s. Then we get to the draft, and he ends up not trading any of his picks. And at 20th overall, despite trading 2 spots down, Cole Yzerman begins to fall. Mind you, I went to the 2022 draft where they traded the 13th overall pick that ended up being Frank Nazar for Alex Romanov, and I do like Romanov a lot. We're going to talk about him more in this video, but I was expecting some kind of trade, but Yzerman continued to fall, and eventually, once we got to 18, Boyver going to Chicago, 19, Connolly going to Vegas, the Islanders are on the clock with Yzerman available, and they actually select the high-end goal scorer. He was 11th on my 2024 draft board. Most people had him between the ranges of like 9th through 15th, considering the fact he was the all-time leading goal scorer for the U.S. National Team Development Program. Yes, he had other problems with his game, and considering he came into the season as a top 2, top 3 guy, but he was was still a damn good prospect and a steal at 20. And unsurprisingly, he would continue that elite goal scoring in his freshman season at Boston University, having 25 goals in 39 games, good for 5th in the NCAAs. And for comparison, the New York Islanders have drafted NCAA forwards in the first round before. It has not panned out, but Oliver Wahlstrom only had 8 goals in 36 games in his freshman year. Kiefer Bellows, 7 in 34. So Yzerman is on a different level. At 54th, he also keeps the 54th pick and ends up trading for Jesse Pulkkinen, a 6'5" Finnish defenseman that played in Liga. He was an overager, but showed some decent signs. Now, granted, he didn't take a progression this year offensively in Liga, but he did end up coming over to the AHL, and he's going to be a project, so you can't really judge him based on his offense at this point. Definitely more of a defensive guy. With that 61st selection, he selects Kamil Bednarik from the U.S. National Team Development Program that also played at Boston University. He did only have 19 points this year for BU, only 2 goals. I'm coping that maybe he just had a low shooting percentage, and he's going to bounce back as he gets an elevated role next year at Boston University. But at this point, I'd be happy if he's a bottom sixer, if I'm going to be honest. And then in the middle of the rounds, he selects 2 goalies that look pretty promising. The first being Dmitry Gamzin, who is 22 years old at this point, but at a .928 in 24 games. For comparison, his starting goaltender in the KHL had 38 games played in a .920. As well as Marcus Gildoff in the 4th round going to the New York Islanders, and he had a .924 in Swedish juniors. He's 6'6", and in the SHL in 17 games, he had a .908. The Athletic currently has him ranked 18th in goalie prospect rankings. So yeah, a very successful draft in my opinion for the New York Islanders. Potentially got a beast 30-plus goal scorer in that first round. Pulkkinen, we'll see. Bednarik, we'll see. And I do like the 2 goalies in terms of one day being the backup to Sorokin and maybe taking the reins from him. In free agency, they didn't do much, but they did sign Anthony Duclair, who unfortunately did get hurt like immediately after signing that 4-year, $3.5 million contract. And then towards the end of the season, him and Patty Well were not exactly on the same page. I think he can bounce back. It's still a pretty low cap hit. I think he can be a 20-goal, 20-assist kind of guy going forward. Hopefully, if him and Waugh get on the same page. But yeah, the season starts. They lose Duclair. They lose Matt Barzal. They lose Pelech. And they start off pretty rough, going 14, 18, and 7 on January 2nd. Then the season looks absolutely cooked once Noah Dobson goes down, but Lou just cooks out of control, just signing and trading everybody. He gets Tony DeAngelo on a league minimum. He trades a conditional 5th-round pick that ends up not hitting. So for free, he got Scott Perunovich as well as Adam Boquist off waivers. And it actually kind of worked for a bit. They ended up going on a 7-game heater. But as Islanders fans, that 7-game heater kind of horrified us because we assumed that Lou Lamoriello is not going to be selling Brock Nelson or Kyle Palmieri. If anything, we're going to trade our 1st-round pick in the 2025 draft to go aggressive. Thankfully, Lou does not pull a Bo Horvat and does any moves like a month before the trade deadline, and they end up playing pretty mediocre hockey leading up to the trade deadline, including losing 4 straight. Then it's the days before the deadline, and Lamoriello, despite not having a clear answer on what his future is, he decides to do the right thing for the long term of the New York Islanders, trading Brock Nelson to the Colorado Avalanche for a 1st-round pick and Callum Ritchie. It happened at midnight. It was absolutely crazy. I was expecting the return for Brock Nelson was going to be like a 1st-round pick and like a B-, maybe a B prospect, or like an A- prospect and a 3rd-round pick. To get a 1st-round pick and a B+ or A- prospect, depending how high you are on Callum Ritchie, was an absolute steal, man. Again, Ritchie is not a sure thing by any stretch, but what he has shown at the OHL in terms of being that 6'3", high IQ playmaking guy, I think he's going to be a solid 2nd-line center at the NHL level and an absolute wizard on the power play. And now the New York Islanders, who previously had like Danny Nelson and Matthew Maggio as their best prospect duo, now have Cole Yzerman and Callum Ritchie. And here's the rankings on them from other sites. The Athletic had Yzerman 18th, Ritchie 21st, Elite Prospects 25th and 15th. TSN didn't have Yzerman ranked, and Ritchie 19th. Daily Faceoff 17th and 14th. The Hockey Writers 23rd and 19th. You get the gist, the other two. It's a pretty decent duo. It is one of the best duos in the entire NHL. Now, there is one Lou mistake from the deadline, of course. He did not trade Kyle Palmieri, and apparently he didn't get the offer that he was looking for. I'm sure it wasn't a Nelson-level offer, but maybe there wasn't a 1st-round pick out there. I still would have traded him for a 2nd and a 3rd, considering he also didn't get a contract extension done. He said, we're probably going to re-sign Kyle Palmieri. That hasn't happened yet, clearly. I'd love to bring back Kyle Palmieri, but it's going to have to be on a 2-year deal at $5 million or like a 3-year one-year deal at 3.75. If he walks for absolutely nothing, that's going to be a damn shame because he still was a pretty good player last year. 24 goals, 24 assists, 48 points. Hey, he absolutely killed the Brock Nelson deal. For someone that a month prior, I thought that he was going to be buying at the deadline, I was not going to complain too much. They end up going 7-9-5 the rest of the way, including 1-5 in their last 6 to finish 35-35-12 with the 11th worst record in the NHL and thus having a shot at the first overall pick. And we'll talk about that first round pick in a little bit, but there was some highlights to build off in that season, even though they were just a completely average 500 team. Simon Holmstrom took a big jump at 24 years old, 20 goals, 25 assists, 45 points, which was a 20-point jump compared to last year. Such a good skater. He's going to be a part of this team for a long time, most likely. Siplikov brought a really nice blend of both skill and physicality, finished with 35 points in 77 games, was very good both sides of the ice. He needs to be better at finishing. He only scored 10 goals, but considering he had 31 in the KHL, I think he's going to build off that next year, and he needs to stop taking the dumbest penalties of all time. He was kind of a liability penalty-wise, but at this point, at 26 years old, I think he can be a 45-point physical middle sixer, which most teams covet come playoff time. Alex Romanov saw a bump in his ice time by like 2 minutes, played 22-18 this season. At stretches was our number one defenseman, playing around 24 minutes and was able to handle it. Not saying he's going to be a top 50 defenseman in no time, but he was very good this season and a true top 4 defenseman. And as much as I maybe don't like him as a person, Tony DeAngelo was very good for the New York Islanders. He had 19 points in 35 games. The power play did look better with him at times than Noah Dobson. He was playing 23-21 a night. They gave him big minutes, and although, again, he's still pretty bad defensively, he was much better even analytically than the prior 2 seasons. I'd bring him back on a couple-year deal, like a 3-year deal at $2 million. As well as in net, Sorokin, although he went from a 908 to a 907, his underlying numbers improved a ton. He had 1.4 expected goals against last season. That jumped all the way up to 17.5, so he's definitely on track to getting back to that 2022-2023 form. Also, in terms of other Islander prospects taking big jumps, Quinn Finley, the 2022 third-rounder, scored 20 goals, 20 assists on a bad Wisconsin team after last year only having 10 goals and 6 assists. Not saying he's really going to turn into anything big, but maybe a potential third-line scorer down the line. As well as Isaiah George, playing a decent amount at the NHL level when they were dealing with injuries, playing in 33 games, being pretty solid. Again, not going to act like he was fantastic, but he at least showed that he can somewhat hang at the NHL level and was almost half a point per game in the AHL, so positive development there. And then finally, Mark Gatcomb proved that he could be a fourth liner at the NHL level, having 8 goals in 39 games, as well as 149 points in 39 games. The Islanders love their identity guys on those fourth lines, and he's probably going to have a role at the NHL level next season over like a Hudson fashion. Then shortly after the season ends, it is announced that Lou Lamoriello will not be getting a contract extension with the New York Islanders. I made a full YouTube talking about it. Although you can shit on the final 3 to 4 years of Lou Lamoriello, still a huge success. The culture that he brought to the organization, the success from 2019 to 2021, although they didn't make a Stanley Cup final, you look at 1995 through 2018, yeah, that is a smashing success by Lou Lamoriello. Awesome job, but it was time to get someone in there with a new vision to turn this team around. And then on May 5th, if you follow me, you've probably seen my reaction to this. The Islanders, with only a 7.2% chance to end up top 2, they win the draft lottery. They select first overall in the 2025 draft. And yes, would I rather have had the first overall selection in 2023, 2024, 2026 with McKenna or 2027 with DuPont? Yes, but beggars cannot be choosers. I hate people that chirp me with that. You got to take what you can. And honestly, 2025, Matthew Schaefer and Misa are better than 2021 or 2022. I am absolutely elated that we are selecting first overall. The fact that we have to choose between Misa or Schaefer compared to Eklund, O'Brien, Smith, or McQueen at 11th overall, you got to have the perspective, and it is so impressive. It's so awesome that they jumped. While the draft lottery was going on, of course, they were looking for a new general manager. They apparently really wanted Ken Holland, which I didn't want one bit. So when he decided to go to the Los Angeles Kings, probably use the Islanders for leverage. I was perfectly fine with that. Bergevin and Kakalainen's name popped up a lot. Ended up not going with that, and they landed on Matthew Darche of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Honestly, the more that I think about it, I probably would have liked Brendan Shanahan as the president and Darche as the general manager. Shanahan only really dealing with like the non-roster stuff, the overall organization, because he really did a good job in Toronto in terms of the culture of the organization and rebuilding the reputation of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But yeah, I'm absolutely elated that Darche got hired. fired still. Because, yeah, he was there in Tampa Bay from 2019 to 2025. Not going to speculate what exact moves he did or didn't do, but just learning under a guy like Julien Brisebois that is so forward-thinking, so analytically driven, and is not afraid to make the tough decision, like telling Steven Stamkos, yeah, you're our all-time GOAT. Yeah, you go hit the open market. Yeah, Sergachev, I know you just broke your leg and had a brutal rehab. We're trading you to Utah. Like, I have really high expectations, and I really cannot wait for Matthew Darche to get going. So obviously I'm high on Matthew Darche from the NHL level, but something that cannot be overlooked that I don't think other fans realize is how much this is going to improve the AHL team. This is Chris Lamoriello. He has been running the Bridgeport Islanders / Bridgeport Sound Tigers since 2016, and before that was the New Jersey Devils AHL GM. He is the ultimate NHL Nepo baby. During his time with the Devils AHL teams, they made the playoffs 2 out of 15 seasons, and with the Islanders, they made it twice in 9 seasons, and they went 12-35-6 this year. And you look at the guys that I mentioned at the start of the video who were their top 5 prospect pool guys, they've kind of completely flattened out. Maggio, DeFore, Odelius. George actually did play pretty decent, but Jeffries was only like half a point per game this year as well. The guy from Merrimack. It has been development hell for the New York Islanders with Bridgeport. I was really scared for Cal Ritchie because although I think that he can be NHL ready off rip, say he wasn't exactly, if he had to go to Bridgeport and had to develop there for a year, that could have completely wrecked his development. And especially someone like Yzerman, I would have been fine him heading back for his junior season as well in college, just because especially with him, he has so many other aspects of his game besides goal scoring to work on. Him in Bridgeport could have got bad, man. And although Darche did not have that much of an impact on the Syracuse Crunch, which is the Lightning's AHL team, Julien Brisebois was the former general manager of that team, so he probably learned a decent amount from them, and he did often take trips to the Syracuse Crunch, who have made the playoffs every single year from 2019 to 2025. They're not the cream of the crop exactly in the AHL, but they're a damn good team. And mind you, that's with Tampa Bay not really having any high draft picks. They've developed guys like Matthew Joseph, Gonclaves, Radish, Dylan Duke. They've done a pretty solid job with not a ton to work with. And I feel like that's an underrated aspect. You got to be able to develop guys between the ages of 20 to 24 once they're out of college, once they're out of juniors, if they're not exactly NHL ready. Some guys just kind of get trapped in the AHL and get poor development and never make it to the NHL. The Islanders have definitely experienced that recently. Now, just in 12 months, the Islanders have really revamped in terms of their prospect pool as well as hopefully their developmental system. They've added 2 low-end blue chip prospects in Yzerman and Ritchie, as well as adding a top 3 prospect in hockey. When we do our updated summer list, it's going to be Demidov and then Misa and Schaefer most likely. And they've gone from, even now, they're 21st according to McKean's in terms of prospect pool. Again, a year ago, 31st, 32nd. And once they get that first overall selection, as well as hopefully a decent pick with their second round, they're going to be a top 11 to 14 prospect pool. And especially for me personally with prospects, I value quality over quantity. Some pools don't really have those high-end guys, but they have like 7 to 8 B plus guys. In terms of a big 3 of Yzerman, Ritchie, and Schaefer or Misa, I think that's a pretty consensus top 5 big 3 when it comes to prospects. And when you look at from the NHL level, Darche is going to have a lot of options this summer. $26 million of salary cap space with RFAs that include Dobson, Romanov, Holmstrom, and Siplikov, as well as Paul Murray as an unrestricted free agent. So he's going to be able to mold this team in different ways and potentially make big moves. He's going to have 3 options for the most part, whether it's win now, trade out a JG Pageau, or even their captain Anders Lee that has 1 year at $7 million. Pageau only has $5 million. Trade out one of those guys, go for an Ehlers, go for a Marner, or maybe it's a 1 to 2 year retool. Maybe he says, I want Gavin McKenna. I want one of those top 4 picks next year. You kind of sell off a little bit in terms of Pageau and Anders Lee and then turn it around after that. Or if he just nuclear blows it up. I don't think that's going to happen because of ownership. I trust Matthew Darche given his reputation and his pedigree. And I think based on what happened in the last 12 months, they have the future to potentially build off that and be successful with whichever way they decide. Because also, they're in the Metro Division, which looks like absolute shit right now considering the Carolina Hurricanes are getting the shit kicked out of them. They're going to be better next year because they have a lot of salary cap space. But when looking at it, Carolina, you got Washington, which is still TBD considering their season this year is a little bit PDO fueled. The New Jersey Devils, the Hughes brothers, can they stay healthy for a full season? You never know. The New York Rangers are old as hell. Columbus were a little bit fraudulent this year, but they're very young. They could be exciting. We'll see how that goes. Philadelphia is still 2 to 3 years away. And Pittsburgh, unless they get McKenna or DuPont, or 4 to 5 years away. The division, for the most part, at least for the second spot, is kind of up for grabs. Like, I think next year you can't expect them to be the second best team in the Metro Division, but in 2 to 3 years, if Schaefer is as good as we think that he is, and I think by year 3 he could be a legit number 1. I think he is that good, similarly to a Sanderson and Heiskanen that hit the ground running, as well as one of Yzerman and Ritchie really hitting, as well as bringing in some potential talent, clearing some of the bad deals. Hopefully someone can take Ryan Palak. This team, they're not going to be the Florida Panthers 2.0, but this team could be a solid 104 point team in the Eastern Conference. It is possible. A lot has to go right, but it is possible. So yeah, the future is bright on the island compared to 12 months ago. 12 months ago, it was absolutely cooked. They were staring down, probably just running this core for another 3 to 4 years and then inevitably having to blow it up. But even then, I'm not sure ownership would have. Like, it was really bad. But now, because of some smart trades, because of some smart draftings, because of lottery luck, let's just be honest, let's call a spade, they're in a decent spot in this offseason. A lot could go right. Definitely a lot could go wrong. But the New York Islanders, for the first time since 2021, have me believing. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about the New York Islanders? What do you think that they should do this summer? What do you think the 5-year outlook is for the New York Islanders? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.